Greetings, fellow mortals. Exposition is a conundrum that writers struggle with on a daily basis. How much information should the audience know? When should it be revealed? How should it be delivered? Does the explaining dialogue make sense? Does it feel contrived that it is being explained in this way? All of those questions and more are constantly being asked by writers when they're writing a scene, and those problems are only amplified in a completely visual medium. Unlike books, there's no way to create internal monologue or explanatory descriptors in a movie or television show. As such, those mediums need to be far more creative when explaining what's going on to the audience. Some do the process well, like with Better Call Saul. That show makes several creative ways to explain a character's past through flashbacks, dialogue, pictures, how the character's facial features are reacting, or even what the characters are looking at in that moment. In comparison, Multiverse of Madness had a memory store. I actually burst out laughing when I saw that. A memory store was the most contrived and random way to give exposition that I've ever seen. Not that the ability to show memories is a terrible idea, it's just that the way that Multiverse of Madness did it was the most laugh out loud, so random thing that could have happened. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Encanto had amazing exposition. I recently watched that movie with my wife. She likes to watch feel-good stories on a regular basis, and I heard good things about Encanto. Of course, the first song of the movie gave me whiplash. The family madrigal was a desperate attempt to introduce the multitude of characters to the audience. The exposition came at me so fast that I could barely internalize it. I'm not a musician, so I can't criticize it on that level at least. It definitely sounded nice and was catchy. But I can feel the creators of the movie in the background desperately sobbing at the idea that they had to explain the roles of 12 different characters in one song. And one of those characters is a house. And they didn't even talk about Bruno yet. Not to say that there weren't good storytelling elements in that song. It does show Maribel's place in the family and her feelings of inferiority. All I know is that both my wife and I looked at each other and wondered if we should rewind it. The movie seemed worried that we wouldn't understand the almost bloated cast of characters, so it didn't fill us with confidence moving forward. Of course, we had nothing to worry about. The movie did a great job making us understand the various roles of the different characters. The writers calmed down and trusted themselves. I could feel them growing more confident with each passing scene. By the time that they got to the topic of this video, the movie settled out. Everyone behind the scenes felt confident in the characters, the setting, and the plot. They knew that they had created something great, and that exploded out in the form of the amazing song, We Don't Talk About Bruno. Now, I'm not a musically talented person. I've tried to understand notes and octaves and all that, but it doesn't click well in my head. It's one of the mental blocks that I have other than identifying trees based on their leaves. I swear to you that I've studied these subjects several times, but they just slip my mind once I'm done. But that doesn't mean that I can't tell when something is exceptional. And We Don't Talk About Bruno is an exceptional song. I can see why it beat Let It Go on the music charts. Ugh, don't get me started on that song. I heard Let It Go so many times when it first came out that it mentally scarred me. Fortunately, I didn't have to listen to kids sing We Don't Talk About Bruno on loop hundreds of times in a row, so it wasn't ruined for me at least, which is good. I actually like going back to listen to the song randomly. It's a beautiful piece of art simply from a musical standpoint. It deserves all the praise that it gets. But like I said, I'm not a music guy. I'm a storytelling guy, and We Don't Talk About Bruno is the best song for storytelling that I've ever seen. I don't envy people trying to write a musical. Not only do they have to write the story of their play, movie, or show, they have to make creative music that ties into the plot. It has to be an artistic endeavor that requires multiple people, multiple forms of talent, and coordination between these various skills. It's not something that I could do with my current level of skill, but I could see it as a challenge that writers would love to face. Especially when it comes out like We Don't Talk About Bruno. So, what makes this song so good from a storytelling and exposition perspective? If I had to describe it as simply as possible, it would be that this song is firing from all cylinders. The base point of the song is to emphasize the shadow that Bruno has left not only on the family but the entirety of the town. It's also meant to show Maribel the weight of the prophecy about her. Bruno's power of fortune telling has always been right, and it almost never ends well for the people involved. It got to the point where people actively thought that Bruno was a malicious figure who delighted in giving bad news. Of course, we soon learn in the movie that the exact opposite is true. Bruno despises his gift. He tried to avoid using it whenever he could. Not only that, it takes a lot of setup, room, and time to use. As such, we can figure out through context that Bruno might not have even used his powers on some of the villagers. A dead fish, a large gut, and a receding hairline are all things that someone can predict without magical powers. That invalidates most of the villagers' complaints about him. After spending a few minutes with Bruno in the movie, we can realize that he was just trying to help them by warning them and pointing out the obvious. That's something that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. I know that I've had plenty of times where I tried to point out a problem and then got treated like I caused that problem. So that leads to the family's perspectives on Bruno. Peppa's story of Bruno seemingly trying to sabotage her wedding day is a sympathetic way to start the song. After all, everyone knows not to mess with the bride on her wedding day. At the same time, Felix's constant attempts to calm his wife and find the bright side of the situation brings an air of comedy to the story. It also does a great job of communicating to the audience what the relationship between Peppa and Felix is like. Within 30 seconds, the people listening can understand who these people are, what they focus on, and how they interact with others. The same can be said for the other characters in the family. Adasa reveals herself as the person who understands Bruno's mannerisms the best. Her placement in the song shows the fact that her more subdued demeanor is often overshadowed by the more bombastic members of her family. Camillo immediately turns the focus away from her more insightful comments to his wild descriptions of Bruno. Isabella's prophecy leaves a dark feeling over Adasa in that their prophecies conflict. Isabella's part of the song even overshadows the fact that Adasa reveals that Bruno is still in the house. This perfectly placed Adasa as the listener of the family. She's meant to hear but not be heard. It's a tragic role that isn't focused on by the movie much. In comparison to Adasa, Camillo's wild descriptions of Bruno emphasizes his trickster mindset. It's not like he should even know much more than Maribel about Bruno. They're the same age after all. Oddly enough, he ended up being right about the rats, even if the 7-foot tall aspect was wrong. It makes the audience wonder just how much Camillo knows. What's behind the man who can have any face that he wants? Then there's Isabella. She's the only one with a seemingly positive prophecy from Bruno. In retrospect, we can only imagine the turmoil that she felt. Later, we learn about the pressure she experienced from needing to be perfect. Isabella had to live up to the one positive prophecy. That was her role. Be perfect. Never make a mistake. Even the so-called evil Bruno dictated it to be so. She couldn't be human. She had to be better and was held to a standard that was killing her on the inside. There's even the small detail of Abuela interjecting herself by calling that the sort of fiancé was there. It cemented her role as the matriarch who is pushing the family along, but also showing that she has no idea what's actually going through the minds and hearts of her family. It's a small detail that emphasizes the entire conflict of the film. Like with Abuela, the song does push forward the plot into the next few scenes. We know that the dinner is the next thing that's going to happen. We understand the weight of Bruno's prophecies. We realize with Maribel the consequences of her failure to fix the house. We gain a better understanding of the characters. We gain a better understanding of their dynamics. We see character development, plot development, and even a little bit of setting development. And we get all of that in the space of 3.5 minutes. Not only is a song great the first time, it gains new meaning every time you go back to it. After all, we learn what Bruno is really like. His actual personality recontextualizes the song to make it far more tragic. Like what everyone else in the family feels, no one truly understands him, his intentions, or his powers. There's a tragic hint to the joyful tune when you realize how lowly everyone in the village thinks of him, despite the fact that he was only trying to help them. It wasn't his fault that they needed to listen to his warnings to feed the fish, to eat less, and to prepare for inevitable balding. That's why I view the song as a perfect exposition song. It proves to be a piece of art that needs to be repeatedly examined in order to understand everything about it and what it does for the story. In a lot of ways, it's the crowning achievement of Encanto. As an aspiring writer, I hope that I can eventually make something half as phenomenal as We Don't Talk About Bruno. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my takes on storytelling, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It would really help me out. Also, remember that I'll be self-publishing my novel, Dance of Frozen Death, at the start of 2023. I hope that you will check it out. I appreciate you. Do not despair.